Good afternoon. Hello, my friend
Oh,
Evgeny. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I know we're a bit late
Excellent.
with live, but it's okay. Stuff happening in
Yeah.
technology.
How many technology people does it take to actually get a platform to work? And apparently the answer is more than the two of us.
Yes, yes. I think the idea of the joke was that how many people you need to have a bulb, change the bulb, and it didn't really change, so you need a
Yes.
lot of people.
Yeah, hold the bulb and spin the house. Well, we are here now, and I am super excited. I know it's been a little while since you and I kind of got together on a video thing. And I know we're going to talk about your book, but I want to share something before we jump in. I just got home from Black Hat. And I spent hours on the vendor floor. And as I share, I feel spiritually and emotionally assaulted when I go down on that vendor floor. Let me scan your badge. Here's a t shirt. Let me scan your badge. Here's a sticker. I got a bag. I got this. I got that. Nobody ever tells me what kind of problems. Nobody ever tries to build a
Which,
relationship, right? And this is something you and I have talked about since we met 18 months ago at CyberX. So first of all, I'm super excited. I'm actually waiting for your book to arrive. Hopefully, it will get here before I head up to New York. Otherwise, I'll just double buy it and get a Kindle version. But um, maybe share, Evgeny, a little bit with our listeners. Sort of, where'd you get the idea to write this book in the first place? I know it's something you and I have talked about for a while, but writing a book is a lot of work.
so, first of all, if you didn't see the book, this is how the books look like.
Yes.
Everybody's watching right now. And if you can see here, there's architecting success. The idea of architecting success came from the idea that I'm an architect, but the book about soft skills. And at least half of the book is focused on sales people and technology sales as well. And the other half of the book can be applicable to anyone. Even if you think about that, we all selling all the time. Who will do the dishes? Which movie we're gonna watch? Where we're gonna go for vacation? And many, many other things. And if you even more think about it, kids are natural in selling. They're natural in soft skills. And they don't really think a lot about it. They want the candy, they want to play more in the park, they want to watch this movie. They find a way how to connect to a parent to get what they want. With time, many kids and people lose this part because then they understand, oh, maybe it's a bit not nice. What if somebody will tell me no? What if I get slap on my hands because of doing something? Because one is parents, others is different people. So we get to the point when we have folks that are doing stuff in one way, and that's it. Why? Because this is what people told them to do. And if you think about even more, we jump on this call or we're going to a vendor and here's a sticker, let me scan your badge, here is my presentation, here's my demo. And in many cases, they're trying to fulfill what they need to do. And this could be, I need as many people in the booth. Why? I need to show them the presentation because we spent a lot of time on the presentation. And my marketing department, my CRO, want to show the presentation because we need to show how many people working there are on my team. I need to show you the demo because I spent a lot of time on this demo. So the inspiration came from what about the customer? What about the other person? What they want? Let's try to understand what did the people want. And as a person that worked for a VAR, a value-added reseller slash MSSP for a very long time, I had this unique opportunity not to watch one vendor presentation, not four, not five. I'm talking about hundreds. For 16 years working for Horjory Group now, Sideris, I literally watch and participate of hundreds of presentation of vendors to the customers. Why? Because I did it with them. I was part of the story. They did their part, I did my part. And what I realized, there's like almost like a sequence. 90% of them, the salesperson will show the presentation, the salesperson will show the demo, and only a few will actually connect to a customer and understand what the better way to spend this time. Do you want to talk about this? Do you want to show me the architecture, the flow, how you want to take and consume the information? And I also learned that The sales engineers now take a much bigger role, not just on the vendor side, also on the VAR side as well, because everything is much more complex right now. In the same time, the salesperson became almost like procurement guru because the process became very hard as well. So stuff changed, how we connect changed. During the pandemic, we have an even bigger problem because we are not face to face. We have multiple screens. We have less focus. When you present to a customer, you don't really know, do they listening to you or they're doing something else and say, amazing, amazing. This is the inspiration came. And then after that, many things came on top of it when I was started writing the book.
Right. Okay. So, one of the things you and I have talked about, and I work with our salespeople on this all the time. People don't want to be sold, right? That's like old school. They have problems that they want solutions to. People buy from people they like. People buy from people that have the same problem or at least can articulate and show empathy. So, what are what are some of the tips that you can share, kind of whet people's appetite for the book? So what are some of the tips? How do you know empathy doesn't come naturally to everybody, right? So what are two or three tips you can give to our listeners that can help them sort of,
So
we're
let's
not going
go.
to solve this in an hour, but move along
No,
that road.
no, no. But so let's do like, let's right jump to the cold water and like, let's talk about the important parts you can do. Soft skills, while they're soft and fluffy, are actually much harder than the hard skill because hard skill you can learn by yourself. Soft skills you have to learn with the other individual. It means you need to open up and show your nobility. This is number one. Not everybody like to do it. Number two, you need to get out of your comfort zone. It could be the vulnerability part, or saying something you're not used to say, doing a job, talk about some other part that you potentially may not go as you expected. So, tip number one, think about what you can open up and how you can open up. Tip number two, you practice soft skills not during work. You practice soft skills somewhere else. You practice soft skills when you're buying grocery and you're trying to chat with the cashier and make them smile. You practice soft skills potentially when you're standing in line somewhere and you're having a joke with the person near you because we're all stuck in the same situation. You practice when you taking a car, a rental car, and many, many other places where there's pretty much no outcome. Like you're not trying to achieve anything here. You're just trying to make a conversation and see if it's going to work. Two things can happen. One, it may work. You make somebody else more happier, and you now know it's working. So this is at least two things that you need to think about it, that you have to open up and do something differently. There's many other things as well, but at least let's have this two.
Yeah. So let's go back to the first one. So you started off with the concept of showing vulnerability, and I think that that's really important because we are, especially in advisory roles like I have, like you've had through your career, don't say you don't know something, right? Don't show weakness, don't show vulnerability. But that has proven time and time again to be incorrect. um, Harvard Business Review did a study, this is probably 10 years ago, where they found that on average, leaders that were liked were far more effective than leaders that were viewed as being knowledgeable, right? So showing your weakness, I'm a big fan of opening the raincoat. And for me as an example, people refer to me as an expert. I don't like that. I prefer experienced practitioner. And all that means is I've made a ton of mistakes and I'm going to tell you about those mistakes so that we collectively don't make those mistakes again.
So
Right. So I think that's really important, to open yourself up. It's okay to show that you've made mistakes. Teach people how to learn from them, right? People like you and I have been around more than a couple of 24s. We don't want to bring the young people in and go, don't admit you're wrong, right? Because that's, especially from a sales perspective.
says I'm going to add here as well. As part of consulting, and it's not even so the book says technical sales, there's a lot of consulting because even when you do technical sales, you still consulting in this case on the product. When you're doing consulting, there's a way for you to ask questions. You want to ask an open-ended questions or closed-ended question. I'll touch base on this in a second. But there is a way for you to work in teams. You brought something interesting in consulting. Do you say you don't know, or what do you do? So here's what I usually do, and this is what we used to do when we did a lot of consulting with teams, because in many cases you are part of the team and you're presenting with the team together. Somebody asking you a question, and you may not sure like you have the answer, but you not have the full answer, and you may need a couple of minutes to think about it, or even maybe have a Slack text to someone to make sure what you're doing. If your partner that you're delivering the work together understand this part, or if your salesperson or sales engineer understand this part, they can take over, talk about something related, give you the 2, 3, 5 minutes to come up with a good explanation, and then almost like ping pong, I took it over, you play with the racket, I took it back, I have the ball, I'm gonna answer this. So there's a chapter about teamwork. And when we used to work face to face, you can see your partner struggling because we are all in the same room. You will take over and you will talk. And when you see you done, you basically take it back. But it's much harder to do it over Zoom, Teams, and Google's. So maybe you use WhatsApp, Slack, Teams to communicate, to say, I need time, take it over. We're not going where we wanted to go. So you're not losing the flow of the conversation. The customers still get what they need, and we can continue this. And we can all agree that face to face was better. But it is what it is. We're not always face to face. But the online part give us advantage because while face to face somebody asks questions, you only have yourself. When somebody asks you questions and you're working over Zoom and somebody else took over the conversation, you now have time to actually message someone in your company that's on standby to get an answer. And now you look smarter, better, and probably have a much better experience with the customer.
Right. So you're talking really about synchronous interaction versus asynchronous. And I think that
Yes.
teamwork through those is very, very different. So from a teamwork perspective, what kind of advice do you provide in the book or through sort of normal interaction for prep work, right? So, hey, we have a sales call at noon. Do we get on the phone 5 minutes early and plan? Do we talk the day before, a week before, a month before?
I think it's going before. I think if you are working with the salesperson or you're sales and working with the engineer, you prep in general. You got paired with John, Julie, it doesn't matter who. You actually talk to this person and you try to understand this person way before you jumping on the call. What is your skill? How do you like to present? What do you like, don't like? Do you okay to text over in the middle of the conversation, or you prefer not because you don't like multitasking too much? So you're actually doing a preparation before, and you may be doing a prep presentation together to understand how you work. It's like in a way riding a bicycle. The more you do it together, do you become better with this. The more experienced are the people, the easier is for them to connect and understand the other person and then go with the flow. There are so many people and practitioners that I presented together or I did together or work with them that we didn't need a lot of preparation because we understood how other person work, and it took us literally minutes. But if I don't know the person, I do want to understand how they present, their style, how they speak. Can I interrupt them or not? So, for example, when a vendor speak and I'm a client or I don't understand what they do, I'm always going to ask the vendor, is it okay for me to interrupt you? They may say yes or no. The mature one will actually say what they're saying. Some will say, you know what? It's better if I finish my presentation and then ask question. Or some will say, no, it's totally fine if you interrupt me because it depends on the person. Me, when I present, I tell people, guys, by the way, I actually know the material really well. So interrupt me anytime you want because I'm here for you. And I'm personally totally fine being interrupted. So you need to understand before, but the moment you aligned, it doesn't really matter how many days in advance you connect with them because you're already aligned. If it's a new customer, you may want to connect and say, by the way, this is the customer, this is what they need, this is what's happening. Because the worst things you can do is ask customer questions that you expected to know because your counterpart already have the answers.
Right. Yeah. You don't ever want to ask someone in the middle of a call. So, what do you guys do at your company? never works well. Right. So let me give you a scenario and tell me how you'd handle it. So I've been the subject matter expert on a call for many times throughout my career. Sometimes the salesperson says something that's not true. What do you do?
You I had some interference. Can you repeat the
Oh,
question?
yeah. So I've been a subject matter expert. There's that word that I just said I don't like to use for on many calls. Sometimes the salesperson says something that's not true. What do you do if your partner misspeaks? Maybe they say your product does something it doesn't do. Maybe they are not as knowledgeable, don't have sort of the background. How do you handle those kind of missteps?
So this is an interesting part because there is no, of course, no one way to correct the situation. This could be if we have a channel, Slack, Teams, WhatsApps, whatever the approved channel in the company, and I can message them, hey, by the way, what you were just saying right now, we don't support, we don't use. And then the person may say, oh, okay, by the way, my mistake, I missed something. And if it's not, then you want to understand, is this a deal breaker? If this is the customer, like, oh my God, the customer is gonna move forward because they expect this to happen. Because you don't really want to tell, hey, Mr. Customer, wait a second, my salesperson is not very smart. You don't want to remove the credibility, so you want to do it as gently as possible. If this get to the point when the customer wants to move forward because of this feature, then it becomes an interesting problem. You are in the end of the call, talk to the salesperson, and if the customer is too big and it's actually possible to build a feature, you bring it up to PM and CTOs and maybe get this something you're moving forward with. But in my way, you're trying gently to talk to your salesperson that they will admit or change what they say, or just say to the customer, sorry, I actually misled you. You don't want to kind of bring them down and be the smartest guy in the room and just show your salesperson is down. Because in the end of the day, you need to work with this person as well.
Right. Right. Okay. No, I like that. I think former U.S. President Gerald Ford had a quote that I love, which he said, "I don't have to know the answer to everything, but I need to know who to ask." So and this is for all you salespeople out there, if your prospect asks you a question and you don't have an answer, it's okay to say, "I don't have that at the tip of my fingers. Let me get back to you," and then do some research.
Now, this is a very amazing point. It's very dependent how you're saying that. If not just say this, if you're a salesperson and you say, I don't know if they support this, then the customer's like, what? There is no credibility here. But if you say, oh, this is a great question, I don't want to really give you an answer just because to make you happy. I'll get back to you and I'll answer for sure. And I'll actually going to answer you in the next 72 hours. Now you sound better. You give them timeline when you're gonna get back to them, and you better get back to them with the answer as well.
Right. Yeah. I'm a big believer. If somebody hits me with a question that I'm not comfortable right off the bat, I always say, that is a great question, right? Give yourself some breathing room, right? It's about EQ, emotional quotient, and being able to sort of read the room and read your audience.
Yes. And part of this is when to learn when to stop asking questions, when to learn when to zip your mouth, kind of be quiet, don't oversell, and let the customer talk. Understand where you can or cannot interrupt. If you got to the point that the customer is talking and sharing what's needed, then you listen to the customer. You're not interrupting because the customer is talking. And in many cases, the customer says, yes, great, no questions. Okay. So this is a magic moment when you have the customers talking. Of course, you may say, what if the customer's talking stuff is not related to the project? Then you need to figure out how to bring them back to the project. There's a chapter called Guiding the Customer. When we're guiding the customer and explaining how it's going to be, it's completely not related to technology. It's like, hey, Mr. Customer, we're going to talk about the technology later on, of course. Assuming we pass the ideas that we love what the vendor is doing. And you want to explain to the customer what's going to happen from now on. While the customer may be familiar with the process, you can ask them, we can explain to you how we usually work if you want to. They may say, yes, I would like to know. But it's also your time to ask the customer, can you explain how you work? What is the process inside the company? And it's all communication. And it's all the questions that in many cases the sales team is afraid to ask back to 80-20 rule, not 80-20 rule, getting out of your comfort zone and asking hard questions. Like what is the, I guess, what is the most important part of sales? Like if you ask like one single quality of the salesperson that people a lot of struggling a lot. This question to you.
Hmm. That's a great question. I would say not really understanding the problem of your buyer. I think that to me is the biggest
I think it's
sort
a
of
very
hurdle.
good one, but what I'm thinking about is closing. They're presenting, they're talking, they're becoming friends, and they cannot close the deal. They cannot ask for the PO. And in the
Right.
end of the day, as a salesperson, the way you metric is you close deals. So if you
Well,
leave
that's good that I'm
everything,
not a salesperson then, because I don't close. I leave it
but
hanging. Yeah.
but you're right. You're right on the idea of to understand what they want. But in the end of the day, you measure by closed deal. And closed deal, it's mean in one point, you need to stop selling and understanding how they actually need to buy and what they need to do for them to buy.
Right. Right. And one thing I just want to add too, when you were if the prospect is going off on a little bit of a monologue, we listen. But if anything comes up that you don't understand or want clarification, write it down. And then when they come back, you can say, so you said something very interesting. I'd like to explore on that a little bit. And I think that does a couple of things, right? It shows that you're actually listening and it keeps you from having to interrupt because some people, like for me, if I get interrupted, I frequently lose my train of thought, right? Because I don't really pre-process anymore. It goes right from my head out my mouth, much to the chagrin of people around me sometimes. But I think it's important to be able to come back and get clarification. Just like as an example, one of my sales guys came to me and he said something, and obviously I got to be very careful. He said a particular client of ours was changing their assignation within a heavily regulated industry. Leave it at that. And I said, well, that nomenclature doesn't really make any sense. Can I get some clarification? And he went back and came back. I'm like, let's get on the phone together so that we can get some clarity. And in a 3-minute conversation, I figured out what they were asking. But that game of telephone, and as you mentioned, the challenge of not being in front of people,
So
so that game
here's
of
here's
telephone,
the
I
fun
think,
part.
is
You
dangerous.
mentioned writing notes. If you and me will be in the same room, you will see me do that and you will be okay. But people listen for video because you see me writing in my notepad. But if we on video, you don't see my notepad. You don't see what I'm doing. So when I'm going here, you're like, are you eating soup, spaghetti? What are you doing there? Why are you doing this all the time? Because you don't see what I'm doing. So there's a chapter in the book about video setup, how to use multiple screens, how to use the microphone, what the hell is teleprompter, what do you want to use one, and why you potentially want to tell the customer, hey, Mr. Customer, by the way, you may see me moving outside the screen. I'm actually writing notes. It's like, oh, okay. Nothing bad. It just tells them what's happening.
Right.
And now they understand. And it literally takes a second to explain. Oh, Mr. Customer, I usually on video, but today I'm doing a service for my car and I'm not going to be on video. Or when I wake up with the headache. Again, my view that when you talk to a customer, you on video. This is the default part. And everybody's in a sales team that jumping on calls and they by default not on video, please rethink about this because there's going to be never a situation when you're going to visit a customer on a physical location and they're not able to see you. You're not an invisible man or woman. So if you excuse have a massive background, then it's your problem, not my problem. If you're walking out of the hotel, and you may say, excuse me, I'm traveling today, I'm walking out of the hotel, I'm going to be without the video. So you need to explain, but if not, by default, you're on the video and you dress. Again, I'm not saying you have to have a suit. I think we don't need to have a suit right now on Zooms, but you don't have a baseball hat because you didn't make your hair. You will have a baseball hat that potentially it's your hook to connect to Jeff because I know Jeff like baseball or football and have this hat that represents him, and I actually like it as well. Because we're talking about
Yes,
hooping.
but
You know?
never ever show up for a meeting with a football helmet on, even if you like football.
Okay. Yeah. Agree.
so,
Agree.
so,
Yeah.
we talked about planning, right? So you and I made a catastrophic mistake. You and I, because we're friends, we've had many of these interactions. You know what we didn't do? We did not introduce ourselves at the beginning of the call.
Absolutely right. I'm Evgeny,
So,
and I'm an author of the book of soft skills, technical sales. If you don't know who I am, I'm more than happy to introduce myself again. Jeff.
okay. So I am Jeffrey Wheatman. I work for a third-party risk intelligence company called Black Kite. My full title is Senior Vice President Cyber Risk Strategist. So basically, Evgeny talked about listening and talking. My job is listening to people, synthesizing, and then providing guidance for people out there. So okay. So I realize we're sitting here, and people may not necessarily know who I am. They know who you are because they're on your LinkedIn.
So
So
part
okay.
of our work, give me a second, Jeff. Part of our work is to connect technology and business. So what we need to do is we need to take, in some cases, complicated technology ideas and present them to business people or general people in a simplified way as possible. And this is part of soft skills because many people having hard time to outcomes their amazing brain in a very simple language.
Right. Yeah, I think it was Albert Einstein who said if you can't explain it to a fifth grader, you don't really understand it. And I think that's really, really important. And that's a big chunk of what I do, right? Is simplifying messages so that it lands with as wide an audience as possible. And that, so you mentioned taking notes. So I'm actually taking notes so I know where we are. So now I'm going to come back to your second tip, which you talked about a few minutes ago, which was practicing these soft skills in your daily life, right? And I think that's really, really important. People tend to have different personalities when they are at work and when they're not. And I think it makes it harder. I always talk about creating a character for yourself and playing a character and learning, what would that character say? How would that character react? I know you and I have talked about this. I'm actually an introvert. Anyone who knows me would never ever guess that. But I play a character because if it were up to me, I'd be sitting on my couch drinking a beer, well, in my case, non-alcoholic beer, with you watching TV, right? I but that's not real. And I think that whole practicing thing and not just practicing what you're saying, but gauging reactions. Some things land better. And then this is also a cultural thing too. And again, I haven't gotten the book yet. I don't know if you talk about culture, but that it's really important, right? You and I have very, very different cultural backgrounds, right? I was born and raised in the Northeast United States. You were not. You had a different upbringing. You have lived in multiple countries. You live in a different country now. Interacting with somebody from Canada is different than interacting with somebody from the US and
Right.
interacting with somebody from Israel, from Russia, right? So how do you help people with those cultural differences, especially if you're selling across borders?
So I touched culture in the beginning, and then we decided to remove culture because we decided it's going to be too big and too
Okay.
complicated. So we left culture to a different book, the next book.
Okay. All right.
Having
So
said
that'll
this,
be volume two.
potentially there's a couple of ideas for volume two based on the feedback already. But from my perspective, what I learned about culture is don't assume what's good for you. It's the same what's good for somebody else. In my way, eye contact is very important. In some other cultures, the eye contact is different. In other cultures, the way they interact with people is different. What's important is different. Argument could be bad, argument could be good. So it's really, really depend. And more, it's related to soft skills because what you will do in one culture may offend somebody else in a different culture. So what I do for myself, I try to learn as much as possible about different cultures to understand what click or not. But what's the best things I learned from me is not just to learn about this, it's to actually ask people. So the moment I became buddies with an Indian, Japanese, Chinese person, South African person, I'm actually going to ask them, what's your holidays? How do you guys interact with the family? What's acceptable when somebody introduces himself and what's not acceptable? Like there is cultures that mandatory for you to give them a business card. Japanese culture, for example, and it's actually offended if you're not going to give them back a business card.
Right. And
And
you have to handle the card in a very particular
yeah,
way. It is considered incredibly rude to write notes on the back of a business card. And you mentioned the Japanese culture. So the first time I went to Japan, they had a mandatory 2-hour workshop for us that showed us how you figure out who's in charge by where people sit at a table. And if the table's rectangular, or if the table's round, or if it's oval, all of those things. And if you talk to the wrong person, you can basically kill a deal right off the bat. And the Middle East is very similar. Um, when you sit down with a gentleman in the Middle East, you never ask him about his wife or family unless they bring it up because it's considered rude. So those things I think are all, and a lot of that, again, to your point, is about doing research, which also comes back to a lot of the other things you talked about earlier, which is showing vulnerabilities, finding commonality. You talked about the baseball cap thing, and I made my bad football helmet joke. But
uh-huh.
understanding, and when I coach people in presentations, I always tell them there are 4 things you never talk about in a presentation, right? Sex, politics, religion, and sports, because those 4 things are the most polarizing things, and all you have to do is say one bad thing and you can kill a deal. And coming back to your point about practice, that takes practice, because I don't know about you, but when I'm talking with my friends, I blurt stuff out that I would definitely never ever say in a meeting, but you have to practice that,
So
right?
it's interesting you mentioned about characters. You mentioned about that you're introvert and you put a character when you present to talk to people. My friends joke about me because there's a chapter about audio, there is a chapter about speech in a book. I speak very, very fast. Like I used to have problems when I age 14, 15, 16 to date with girls because I couldn't really convey my message. I was like mumbling and would be very fast. And it took me quite a lot of time to learn to slow down. It took me quite a lot of time to remove filler words. I still have some, just say like, for example, 2 minutes ago, but very, very, very few compared to 6, 8, 10 years ago. I learned to slow down. I have like almost like a watchdog in my brain that watch for me to slow down. And in some cases, because I'm doing podcasting quite a lot for the last few years, when I talk to my friends, like, what's up with the podcast voice? You hear with buddies. Come on, get out of the podcast voice. Speak normally with us. But you get into a character. You almost just the moment it goes live, microphone is working, you switching something in your mind and you become not a different person. It's a different part of yourself, I guess.
Right. All right, good. So we're a little bit more than halfway through. Just want to tell folks, if you have any questions, submit them through the platform, and either Evgeny and I will answer them, hopefully, or we'll tell you we don't know, and we'll have to come back with that. So let's kind of circle back to really the first thing that I talked about. I know you were not at Black Hat last week, but there's always a lot of run up on social media, particularly on LinkedIn, about what's okay and what's not. And then of course there's always the sort of after action chatter. What vendor did the worst thing? Like there was actually something this morning, um, posted by actually a mutual friend, Olivia Rose. And Olivia posted something about one of the vendors, and I won't name names, but they had some ladies dressed in evening gowns wearing lampshades over their heads, right? And my response was, how did anybody think that was okay? I have to imagine a bunch of people looked at this, but like the sale doesn't just start when the salesperson talks to the prospect, right? So some of these soft skills are actually before that initial engagement, right? How do you as a vendor want to be viewed? How do you as a vendor want to be
Mhm.
seen? Um, we saw it with CrowdStrike a couple of weeks ago. There were some vendors out there that said, hey, whatever you need, we'll help you. There were others who will remain nameless, but you can find them. One of them basically set up a website that said they were going to help. They put a phone number, and when you dialed the phone number, you got the SDRs from one of CrowdStrike's competition. That does not help. It does not engender you. And I don't know about you, I would never choose to do business with a company like that,
I agree. I
right?
agree. You need to
So
not do the ambulance chaser, but
yeah, and I reached out to our head of sales, and I'm like, if I see that, we have a problem. Like, you are not to go do that. Your whole thing is, we have data, we can help you. Here's the data. That's it, right? And it comes back
collectively,
to
let's
something.
collectively
Yeah,
help everyone.
right. And you probably heard me. I sort of have this shtick spiel that I've been doing lately, which is about the fact that we're at war. And we are losing. In part, we are losing because we are a fractured set of defenders against unified attackers. And that collaboration, that cooperation is partially why we are fractured. We see internally at companies, and this actually is something I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on. Um, there may be multiple buyers at a particular prospect who may need different stories, right? So we'll circle back to that in a second. But that whole lack of collaboration and that conflict, and even vendors fighting with each other, I get we're competing for the same dollars, pounds, euros, yen. But at the end of the day, I believe our job ultimately is to make the world safer, right?
Also,
And maybe that's a little altruistic, but I believe that in my heart of hearts, right? So what do you suggest from sort of that social soft skills perspective when you have different stakeholders at a buyer who want to hear different stories, who want to have different levels of engagement, who maybe want to be interacted with in different ways? How do you balance those?
we all of us learn differently. Some people like audio, some people learn over video, some people like to play stuff. There's a complete science about this called NLP and many other psychology studies explain how people learn. What I believe we need to be doing is to ask people, what is the best way for you to talk today? We can present, we can do demo, we can talk about it. They may say, I don't know, do whatever you want to do. Or they may say, start presenting and we'll interrupt you and ask you questions. But at least you ask him if there's a particular way they want the information to be presented. It also depends if this is the first time we're presenting and we are pitching to a customer versus a customer reaching to us and asking us for information. Because in the second way, they're already interested in the product. In the first part, not way, first part, they don't know anything. So we're trying to pitch. So we may say we're going to present or we're going to talk about the product for a few minutes, and then we can switch in a different way you want it to when you consume. The problem may have, as you say, what if there is multiple people on the call? They want the information a different way. And what I suggest doing this, I think we're slowly moving to a part of do we really need to do a demo or present during a live call? Or we can have a mini recorded demos, presentations that we can tell, hey, by the way, we're going to talk today, but there is a set of libraries of the information we have. This is a very, very technical presentation or demo. This is a presentation that more talk about ROI, return on investment for you, CFO. This is an architecture presentation that explains about flows and what we can do. And there's platforms, I'm not going to promote any platforms right now, that actually can help you to pitch all this together and put all this together. You can do it. Or you can just put them on YouTube as well on your website. This way, you have, in my way, a better view to actually address everyone.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that. I'm a fan of kind of role playing and scenario planning, and I think that this is particularly helpful for salespeople because you can, I don't know about you, and I'm fairly confident the answer. I've been on some sales calls that have gone sideways, right? I've been on interactions that went sideways. It happens, but you got to learn. I used to tell people when they work for me, I'm fine if you make a mistake as long as we learn, and you know, I'll make a mistake, but I do not like to make the same mistake twice. So how do you work with salespeople and sales management so that people can grow and become better without feeling like they're being criticized, right? Because nobody likes that.
This is an important part because we need to provide feedback. There's a differential between leaders and management. Management tell you what to do. Leaders actually help you to grow. So there's a couple of ways in my mind to do it. One is show by example. You show them how you present, how you interact with people. You invite them to a call when they can listen. What do you do and how you react? You ask them to do calls where you listen or they present to you. There's many companies that before an junior salesperson going to present to a customer, they first need to pass an internal exam when they have to pitch internally, pass everyone, and only then they're going to present to a customer. But if you're doing that, nothing stopping you from time to time to join calls with the salespeople, listen to what they do, understand what they do, and later on say, I'm not here to criticize you. I'm not here to make you afraid. Just do whatever you do because people may say, I'm afraid now I change the way I speak because my manager is here. And later on, in your one-on-one, there is a lot of one-on-one examples how you can deal with people. There's a great company where I learned about one-on-one called Manager Tools. which I have no affiliation, but they've been around for 20 years. They explained how to do one-on-ones, to explain how you can coach people and I give them feedback in a good way and not in a bad way to help them grow and become better.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's a really important soft skill is the ability to correct without sounding overly critical. Um, I actually, part of my morning routine, I look on Dig, and there was a whole thing this morning about a manager of a company who basically went crazy on his staff, screamed, slammed the door, and then he didn't understand why people left. Right. So clearly, that person, and I'm going to say dude because it was a guy, has zero EQ, has zero soft skills, and doesn't understand how to interface with people. And I have seen more and more situations where people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses, right?
Yes.
People quit situations, they don't quit companies. So,
Yes.
to your point, these soft skills, yes, they help with sales, but it helps with management, it helps with leadership. And I love your differentiation between management and leaders because I agree with you. And I worked for companies that basically took people that were good at a job and gave them a manager role, didn't teach them how to lead teams. And then I work with companies that you needed to do leadership training before they ever considered you for a bump up. And I don't know about you, but I believe that good leaders can manage teams when they don't really even understand at a deep level what the teams do.
100% agree. And good leaders understand that people are different. Good leaders understand that not everybody is the same. Because the wrong thing to do is to assume that everybody need to be like you. And the good
Right.
leaders and good coaches understand that what if I put you on the other side of the situation? Is this going to be the same way or a different way? So open up your mind, maybe be a bit more vulnerable, open-minded. Actually, I have a joke about open-minded. I'll tell in a second. To understand how people consume information, how people understand what they do and how they will react. And the joke about open mind, when I came to Canada in 2006 to visit my sister asked, hey, how about to try to find work here in Canada? And I was working at Checkpoint during this time. So we went online, we found a company called Herjoy Group who was looking for a Checkpoint engineer. Long story short, very, very quickly, I got asked to come for the interview. I was actually supposed to fly back to Israel. And I had no dress code here. There was no suit, nothing here. I was visiting. My brother-in-law told me, have mine. He's like, dude, you're two sizes more than me. Like, it's going to look awkward. So I went in jeans and a blue t-shirt that says open mind. My English was pretty bad. Let's put it like that. So during the interview, they asked me what kind of person you are. And I'm like looking left, right, and just basically taking a pen and showing on my chest. I'm an open mind person. You know, created a lot of laughter. Everybody liked this. And this is, I think, most important. You want to be open mind person. You want to understand that people are going to be different. People will react differently. People are not going to be like you. People may have a different reaction. This person that left slammed the door, maybe something happened in his life. Maybe he had a fight back home. We don't know. People didn't know, but it doesn't matter in the end of the day. As a leader, You want to understand that you have bad days, and your people that you're leading may have bad days as well. Now, I always tell people when I manage people, if you doing stuff 20 times good and you screwed up the 21st time, it's okay. If you screwed up 18 times out of the 20, we have a problem, or even 10, or even 5. But if you have a problem once in a while, not an issue, because what I learned really well in technology, no one is perfect. I actually don't going to hire anyone to do a technical job if they told me they never made a mistake or never brought a network down, because we're human. If you don't make mistakes, it means you don't try.
Yeah, it's funny because that actually came up in a conversation that I had with some colleagues out in Vegas last week, where basically we said if any vendor tells you they're perfect, I would kick them right to the curb, right? And it actually came up in the context of third party risk because people sending out questionnaires. If every question is perfect, I'm going to do a deeper dive on that vendor because I now have questions. Because, you know, again, I love how these things circle back, right? Coming back to vulnerability, admitting you make a mistake, admitting your data is not perfect, your conclusions might not be perfect. And this, I think, is where AI is going to help us going forward because it'll give us this sort of multi-prong approach, right?
We're
We
not
use the AI to
switching
do
this chat to
analysis.
AI. We're not talking about
Yes.
AI right now. Okay.
Oh, it's too late. It is mandatory now. If you don't bring up that acronym, they kick you off the internet.
Okay. I do have a chapter about AI. Okay. I didn't tell about anybody yet. The last chapter in the book is about AI and vision. My friend Mike Kruger about how the potentially sales will change in the future using AI. So it's last chapter in the book. It's more about the prediction versus what's happening right now.
Yeah. Well, I think that AI, just like anything else, is going to be an enabler. I don't think it's going
Yes.
to take away from the need for humans to be humans to interact with other humans. Um, and I think actually people have maybe potentially have a lot to learn about empathy from AI. I think that will continue to go, and I think that stuff helps with scenario planning. So, all right, so we have a few minutes left, and Evgeny and I would both like to thank all the folks that tuned in. It's the middle of the day; we get everyone's busy. Any final kind of closing thoughts other than buy the book or else that you'd like to share
Yes,
with our
yes.
listeners?
So important part, there's a website for the book that we'll share as well. Soft Skills in Tech .cn.com. We're gonna put blogs. We're gonna put video training, and there is something in the end of the book called SSDP, Software Skills Development Plan, that help people to improve their soft skills 30, 60, 90, 120 days to become a better person.
Oh, that's not any kind of a laudable goal. You're going to make people better. Well, if there's
Also,
anything I can do to help you with those soft skills, because I've been told that I have some of those, I am
do-
happy to do that. So, for those of you listening out there, um, obviously, if you're seeing this, you're probably already connected to Evgeny. Connect to me. Both of us share a lot of good content, and I always tell people if you have any questions, feel free to ping me on LinkedIn via email, and the same thing for Evgeny. And you know, I'm a big fan of giving back to the community that has given me this amazing career and this amazing life. And I always tell people there's no bad questions other than ones you don't ask. So, Genny, I want to thank you for your time. I have come to greatly value our friendship over the last 18 months. Um, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to either one of us.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Cheers. Have a good one.
Wait a few minutes.